Hello, welcome to task for today, TFT-19. We have completed the first 4 topics from paper 1, and today we will be sharing with you a small background of sociological perspectives in the Indian sociological thought. We will not be doing all the thinkers in detail, but instead we will give you a sort of comparative view with the Western thinkers, and then it will be easier for you to apply the sociological thought on different parts of society or while studying Indian society. The book that is to be followed is Indian Sociological Thought by B.K. Nagla. Its PDF is available online, but it is not complete. So, you will either have to ask the rest of the chapters from people who have it, or you will have to buy it. This will be our basic text. Another source that you may refer later will be IGNOU, but since the different chapters or different topics are scattered, therefore we will focus on B.K. Nagla, and later on you can also refer to Nitin Sangwan. It is good for revision. Before starting today's TFT, let's try to recall whatever we have studied till now. We studied about the emergence of sociology, in which we studied about the 4 revolutions, and mainly we were interested in the intellectual developments which took place in Europe and how it influenced the development of sociological thought or sociology as a subject. It was followed by the difference in perspectives between different schools of thought and the question of the development of sociology as a science. Some were in favor of positivist method, while others they were in favor of non-positivist methods. The research methods were divided into 2 types, quantitative as well as qualitative resources, and the major question which confronted these methods were reliability and validity. So each method was measured on the scale of reliability and validity, and consequently they were adopted by different sociologists. Usually sociologists went for a combination of approaches, like a combination of either qualitative or quantitative methods or inductive and deductive approaches. We studied about 6 thinkers, and the beginning or the earliest sociologist, they followed the positivist methods. The positivist method, for example, included the conflict perspective as well as the functionalist approach. The conflict perspective was given by Karl Marx, and he studied the conflict taking place in social structure. He studied the class structure, and he imagined a revolution which would be known as the proletarian revolution, which would bring a new social order or a new type of society which would be known as communism. Durkheim was a proponent of the functionalist theory, and he was interested in social order or the maintenance of social order, the norms and values which built a society, and how collective consciousness was present in society and how it led to social solidarity. He also studied different types of suicides. There were other thinkers who also followed the functionalist perspective, for example, Talcott Parsons and Robert Merton, and they further developed on the functionalist theory, and they sought to tackle the loops or loopholes of functionalist theory. For example, they tried to understand social change or conflict in society. Max Weber, on the other hand, he tried to use a combination of approaches. That means he was like a bridge between the positivists and the non-positivists. He followed a causal approach while trying to understand Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism, and he also studied the meaning or interpretation of social action, the Western approach. The final thinker that we studied was Mead, and he studied about I and me, or the development of self in a society, and how it leads to the creation of a generalized other through which people react or act towards the final or macro structure or social institutions of a society. While studying society, there are many parts that one should keep in mind. For example, what are the constituents, or what are the basic parts, basic foundational structures which build a society? Are they the people, the relationships between different people, and as well as the social institutions? What make up the social institutions, or what is the basic structure of a social institution, and what happens when external or internal forces act on the parts of a structure or a social system? If you remember Parsons, we studied about the environment and how the external environment acts on social system and it leads to a social change. So when one is interested in studying society, then they have to study the forces which are acting on the social system. What problems has modernity or the industrial society brought, and what kind of reforms are we looking at? How do we plan to solve different social evils or social ills? Whenever we think of Indian society, then we understand that Indian society is made up of its tradition or culture, rituals, norms, values, and it depicts a certain continuity or stability in present society. But at the same time, it has also undergone change. It has also become modern or modernized due to external influence or the forces of modernization, globalization, westernization. Therefore, Indian society at present can be considered to be a mixture of continuity as well as change. It has continued with its tradition, but it has also accepted few aspects of modernity. Therefore, it is like a melting pot which has taken care of its tradition and also embraced modernity. This is what the Indian society is about. It is a picture, a symbol of continuity and change. What do we understand by tradition? When we talk of tradition, then the first thing that comes into our mind is religion, because India, which was present before the advent of foreign invaders, was revolving around religion, and Hinduism was its major religion. It was the oldest of all religions inhabiting of the people of India, and a distinct feature of Hinduism was that there was no centralized authority, or it did not have fixed dogmas. But what did he have then? It had certain structures, institutions, beliefs, norms and values, and it permeated the economic as well as educational system. So Hinduism would provide the belief system or the value system governing the various social institutions like economy, education and other institutions. But like other societies, the Indian society, or the society which was there, which existed before the advent of foreign invaders, it had to undergo certain change, and it came under the influence of two types of forces of change. One was external, which was present within the social structure, and it was known as endogenous forces or endogenous change. The other change was external, that means it was because of foreign invaders, and this change was known as exogenous. The endogenous changes can be reflected in the rise of socio-religious ideologies such as Buddhism and Jainism. So these came after Hinduism. There were some people who were not pleased with some of the features of Hinduism, and they brought their own set of beliefs, faith, and they called it Buddhism as well as Jainism. But since it was the product of the societal structure of India, therefore it would come under endogenous changes. The other change was exogenous changes. These changes, they occurred through the advent of foreign invaders who belonged to either Islam or Christianity, and we were mainly influenced by the British rule. Although Islam also played a very important role in changing our societal structure, yet it was the British rule amongst all the European rulers which impacted our societal structure the most. How? It gave us a common political structure, common legal system, uniform administrative system, uniform educational system, and it also made us economically interdependent with the world. And we also grew a new kind of growing national awareness. So we understood what nation state was, what nationalism was. It was all because of the British rule. I have shared few pages from this book, Indian Society by Nadeem Hasnain. If anyone is interested, you can buy that book, or if it's available somewhere, you can have a look at the first few chapters. Those will give you an in-depth understanding of Indian society. So what happened when finally we had the Britishers in India? What impact did we experience? Here we have to understand that before the British came to India, we were a traditional society and we did not know anything about modernization. But after coming in contact with British rule, we understood that there was something known as modernization, and this modernization did not always mean wearing Western clothes, but it meant a change in technology as well as culture. And this, because it was external, an external force was acting on Indian society, therefore these changes were known as heterogeneous or heterogenetic process of change. And as mentioned before, we had many Europeans visiting India, for example, Portuguese, the French, the Dutch, yet it was the British which influenced us the most. Now, we were a highly traditional society while the Western culture was modernizing, right? So how did it impact us? It brought new ideologies like rationalism, individualism, utilitarianism, remember, scientific revolution. So these ideologies which were born in Europe, because of globalization, it traveled to India, and we also came to understand that, okay, these are some of the new ideologies that are good, and if we want, we can also try to adopt them. And we also understood that there was something known as equality, egalitarianism, and universalism, that what the British rule was doing to us and how it was exploiting us, it was not giving us an equal status, was not right, and we should not accept the exploitation or suppression of our rights. And it gave rise to a sort of revolutionary thinking. It made us aware of our rights. So here you can see that we were a society based on status, hierarchy. Why? Because of the caste system. We were also a very religious nation, a religious entity, but with the advent of the British, now we had new structures. As mentioned before, the education system was pan-India, legal, military, everything was nationalized. So we understood that these were some of the social institutions that were worth accepting. And our definition of stratification or hierarchy or status changed, because earlier we used to think that status or hierarchy depended on one's caste, but now we understood that there was something known as meritocracy or merit, and if we would educate ourselves, then we could climb higher in society, we could attain success. And these shaped our minds and influenced us heavily. Continuing with the changes under the British rule, you have read all these under modern India, yet I am going to repeat them. First was English language, and second was secular education. Earlier, most of the education was based on the understanding of religious text, but now religion was separated from education and importance was given to secular education as well as learning of English language. English language, as you know, it was a common language. Earlier, only vernacular languages were given importance, and so people belonging to different areas could not communicate with each other. They were living in smaller clusters. But now, because of a common language, they could interact with one another. Even the official work was done in English now, and this also helped us interact with the outside world. How? Because now we could read their books, we could learn about their ideologies, ideas, and we could understand about the new values that they preached, which were egalitarianism, rationalism, secularism. So English language was a window which opened us towards the world and which expanded our vision and our viewpoint. And when the British, they introduced modern means of transport and communication, though for their own sake or for ruling the nation, but it served us also because it helped in reducing the distance between different corners of India, and people could travel from one place to another, thus increasing intermingling of people and strengthening the concept of nationalism. Even the new printing technology, postal services, radio, etc., it helped in the dissemination of ideas. So ideas could reach different parts of India and people were more aware. They were no more ignorant. Earlier they did not know that these were the ideas that the world preached or world believed in, or they did not know about their rights. But because of the new forms of technology, Indians belonging to different parts, Indian belonging to different regions, they were aware and their ignorance reduced. Another development was in the area of penal code, because now they understood the idea of justice and how it played a role in their life, and this helped them understand that the traditional law was discriminatory because it discriminated people on the basis of their caste, and the lower sections of society, they were exploited because they accepted this traditional law. But now, because they understood about the concept of justice, equality, they were ready to oppose this traditional law. they understood that they were equal before law, because now India had a uniform legal system. With changes in the administration, transport and communication, technology, postal services, industrialization and urbanization was not far away. Just like in Europe, we also saw rapid urbanization, factories, people migrating to cities, new developed urban settlements, and there was a rise in social status of people, and people accumulated material wealth. Along with all these, as mentioned before, the concept of nationalism emerged, and people were united by this thread of nationalism. Along with the change in social structure of India, there was also a change in the people who inhabited India. We had a new westernized elite which studied or gained Western education, believed in Western ideologies, and it replaced the traditional elite. Who were the traditional elite? For example, the propertied class, or those who were higher up in society or societal hierarchy. Now they were replaced by those people who were more educated, who were more open to the Western thinking, Western value system, Western ideology, and this restructured the society. This class was interested in social reform and opposed those parts of Hinduism or those parts of religion which was discriminatory, which was against equality, against humanity, which exploited the lower classes of society. This was more modern. Yet there was an irony, because now the society or Indian society, it had been impacted by modern ways of thinking because of the colonial rule. So it had elements of modernity, yet it had not lost the traditional structures completely. For example, we can see the caste system still existing in society. We can see joint family system. We can see arranged marriages. So Indian society, after the coming of the British or the colonial rule, it had a characteristic of both the tradition as well as modernity. Therefore, it can be said that Indian society was a symbol of continuity as well as change, and it has existed as an Indian entity. It has maintained traditional structures, although with some changes, with some modern elements. For example, it has embraced few elements or few characteristics of Islamism, Christianity, yet it also has ascribed status. That means the status that we are born with, our caste, hierarchy, which is present in a caste system. That means upper, lower divisions, then ritual purity of the Brahmins, for example, the impurity of the Shudras. All these are also present in the Hindu social structure or Indian social structure. Similarly, even though we have nuclear family structure, we also have joint family norms, and we have urban settlements, industrialization along with villages. We have had religious reforms movements, secularization, yet we also believe in religion. Religion has not entirely lost its importance. So Indian society is a symbol of continuity and change, and if a sociologist wants to study Indian society, then he or she has to look at society from both these aspects. Another dimension of continuity in Indian society may be seen in the continuity of little traditions with great traditions. That means the existence of tradition with modernity. For example, if you see modern educated urban people, then when they are sick, they will go to a modern physician. But the same family, they may take certain tabeej or babut from godmen. So this coexistence is seen in Indian society. So though people may accept technology, yet they may also perform puja while buying a new tractor. Similarly, we can also see that the Hindu masses, they may visit a mazar, and this does not dilute their Hindutva. So this interaction, even though they are interacting with other people of the great tradition, yet this continuity is being maintained. This does not mean that their religion has lost its importance or they have become less religious. So what ensures that this continuity is maintained? That means there is something inherent, something which is an intrinsic trait which is inside Indian society, Indian civilization, which ensures that it does not change. That means you can say it is an unchangeable core. Even though it is influenced by external forces of change, yet only superficial changes may happen, or some changes may happen, but it will not change the intrinsic core of Indian tradition. Speaking of change, what are the factors of change in Indian society? So the first force of change came from the British rule. We saw democracy, universal adult franchise, then constitution, we had our own constitution, we expanded, we urbanized, then we started receiving modern education, and we also had our own legal and administrative system, and even at the grassroots level we had market economy, because now markets were reaching those at the villages also, and this led to the breakdown of the Jajmani system, the old system which was on the basis of land. So there was a change in the societal structure, in the power structure of Indian society. There was a breakdown of social institutions, you can say. Just like in Europe during French Revolution, we can see that the old social institutions, they broke down and new forms emerged. Similar changes were observed with the advent of British. We had nuclear families coming up because now people were migrating to cities to earn livelihood. Urbanization was on rise, and there was a form of cultural lag. Cultural lag means whenever new kind of social institutions are coming up and people are not used to these social institutions, then there is a lag in the adaptation. So the people, some of them, they were resistant towards these changes because they were in favor of the traditional social structure. And we could see these were the forces which opposed change were communalism, casteism. Although we had technology, yet there were forces which were opposing change too. Similarly, we developed as an economy, democracy, but we also saw atrocities on the weaker section, and we became more intolerant to diverse views. Thus, society was changing, but it was also accompanied by a resistance to change. So, the task before the Indian sociologist was huge because they had to study Indian society in terms of tradition and modernity. That means continuity and change. So there was a huge task before them. There were so many structures to be studied, so many forces of change to be studied, and there were many perspectives which evolved on the lines of Western sociological thought, and we will be studying or knowing about 4 major perspectives. First one is Indological, second structural functionalism, third one is culturological or cultural, and fourth one is Marxist. Indological approach is also known as the textual approach. It includes interpretation of ancient texts or linguistic studies of ancient Indian culture. It is a historical as well as a comparative method, because when you have a text before you, then you are going to compare different timelines, people from belonging to different timelines, and how the societal structure was present in these times. What text are they going to read or they are going to research on? Those would be historical text, epics, religious manuscripts, texts. For example, the Vedas, Puranas, Manusmriti, Ramayana and Mahabharata, and this Indological perspective was founded on the assumption that the Indian society and culture are unique and they have a contextual specificity. That means that whatever India or Indian society is has a certain context, and in order to understand the context we need to go back to history. And how do we go back? By reading the texts. This was Indology. G.S. Goode, he was an Indologist. He is also known as father of Indian sociology. He adopted a flexible approach to theory and methodology. That means he was open. Though he was an Indologist, yet he was not averse to field work. So he was mainly in favor of a bookish view or bookish perspective, bookish methodology. He was a functionalist and he was interested in how different parts of society contributed to social integration. Remember Durkheim, social order and the functions of different parts of society. Second perspective was structural functionalism. We remember Parsons, Merton. So, though we started with the textual view, later on we were influenced by American sociology, and that is why we adopted structural functionalism. Under this perspective, societies are seen as persistent. That means the continuity that we were talking about, because India also represents, or Indian society has traces of continuity. So why societies are persistent? Why they are cohesive, stable, generally inherited wholes. You remember organism, Spencer? So structural functionalism, it helped sociologists understand India. Although India was divided or differentiated into different cultural and social structural arrangements. So this structure of Indian society was understood by the structural functionalists. This was the contextual view or the field view. This was not a bookish view. It was supported by, advocated by SRINIVAS, who was a student of G.S. Ghurye. So even though G.S. Ghurye, he was interested in a bookish view, a book view, his student was in favor of field view. He adopted the method of direct observation, that means going to the field and conducting research and studying Indian society as a totality. That means even though Indian society was divided into smaller structures, different languages, different cultures were there, yet it was a single entity. So why was it a single entity, and what was the reason for its continuity, its stability? This was studied by SRINIVAS. The next perspective was the Marxist perspective. Marxism rests on dialectical historical orientation, that means conflict between two opposing forces, and these are the forces and relations of production. And the Marxist thinkers, they studied the property relations, because in India property was the main cause of difference in the haves as well as have-nots. A.R. Desai was a Marxist. He was the only Marxist to support historical dialectical materialism. He studied the dialectics in rural urban areas, the caste and class structure, and according to him, tradition was not because of rituals, but India's nationalism or India's traditions, they have their roots in Indian economy and production relations. So he interrelated economy with Indian tradition. He said that what tradition or whatever tradition we have inherited today is because of the material conditions which were created by the British colonialism. How did they create new material conditions? Because they introduced industrialization and modernization, and these brought technology and changed the forces of production, and they defined our traditions. So what traditions did they define? This economic relationship, which was defined by property, difference in property, it was seen in political institutions or education, because the propertied class, it dominated these social institutions. And if India was looking forward to a change, then a change in economy or economic and production relations was needed for this change to happen. So Indian tradition, that means the social institutions which were present that time, or the caste system, they defined Indian society, and they existed because of economy. Why economy? Because economy was related to property, and the higher caste people, they were the property owners, so they dominated all the traditional social structures. And if we wanted a change in society, a change in Indian society, then we would have to change the economy. And how would we change the economy? By bringing in new industries, economic growth. And according to A.R. Desai, these developments would disintegrate caste, or would help in the decreasing significance of caste. So you can see how there is a similarity between Marx and Desai. For example, Marx believed in a classless society. Yes, he believed in a proletarian revolution which would bring a society known as the communist society. Similarly, Desai believed in a classless society. These would happen when new economy or new economic structure would come in India. But both these thinking, they were a form of utopia or ideal society. They believed in an ideal society. So you need to remember that this is how both are related. The last perspective is the cultural or the culturological perspective. It analyzes the culture of human societies, or here India. Why? Because culture is a symbol oriented. You remember, because symbols are given by humans to understand each other, to communicate, and these are inherited. They are carried over generations. They are transmitted to the younger generation, and these are not impulsive. They are not impulse oriented like the animals. No, they are learned. For example, through education, through family, these are transmitted to younger generations. These can be in the form of different languages, customs, conventions. For example, we have certain tribes in Andaman. So when we say that they have their culture intact, that means they still speak their own language. They have not given up their customs and conventions. So they have carried or preserved their culture. So this perspective studied the cultural aspect of Indian society. This was done by Yogendra Singh. He did not follow a particular perspective like the other thinkers, but he adopted an integrated approach. For example, of Max Weber's, of Parsons, as well as Marx's ideas. He was mainly interested in social change, how social change takes place under the influence of internal and external changes, and how a cultural structure involves little as well as great traditions. That means when it is being impacted by Islamism or Westernization, then how does the societal structure also change? For example, the microstructure, which includes family, kinship, caste, whereas the macrostructure of, let's say, bureaucracy, the polity, industry, economy, how do these get impacted under social change, under different forces of change. He gave two terms. One was traditionalization, the other was modernization. Modernization happens when the system is under the influence of external forces, while traditionalization happens when the forces of change is internal. All these concepts are related to social change, and social change is the last topic of our syllabus, and we are going to study these in detail, but today is an introductory session to these different perspectives. The approach now would be a combined approach, because studying each chapter, each topic separately is not going to serve your purpose, because you are going to develop a fragmented understanding of the syllabus. Therefore, we will go for a combined approach. That means we will see the same topics from both the papers. For example, stratification from P1 as well as P2, kinship, same, religion, work, politics, social change, all these will be seen from the perspective of paper 1 as well as paper 2 thinkers. There are few more thinkers in paper 2. Those thinkers, the application as well as the concepts that they gave will be taught when the relevant topic comes. For example, caste system would come under stratification. Different social reform movements will come under social change. Then we will also have, along with caste system, we will learn about the different tribes, Dalits. In kinship, we will be studying about the different families, family structure. Religion, we will be studying about secularization. That means how religion has been separated from government or the state. So how has it impacted the status of religion as a moral authority? What kinds of different work organizations or labor organizations are there in society? For example, the informal as well as the formal organizations. Then we have different forms of protest, social movements or revolution. These we will be doing together so that you develop a holistic view of different thinkers and the correlation of P1 with P2. Once the syllabus is complete, by December we are planning, then in January you can go for either in-depth studies or note making or answer writing. But first round of syllabus should be complete by December. So till then, please keep reading, revising and remembering. All the best.